the Cubs-related podcast presented by CubsInsider.com. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan, and we are coming to you on a Sunday afternoon. It is about 3:30 in Chicago, and the Cubs have taken a split in Cincinnati. And Brendan, I think given the pitching matchups that we saw this weekend, namely a few of the guys going for the Cincinnati Reds and the Cubs' road woes up until this point, I think we are all pretty content with a 2-2 series here in Cincinnati.
I'll take it. You know, the Reds, they had their nasty breaking ball going. They were chasing off the plate. The Cubs were. So all in all, it could have been worse. They fought back in that last game, and I'll take it, Corey.
This was one of those games on Sunday that we talk about a lot that does kind of change the way the vibe of the podcast is going to go. And on Sunday, we can thank one Christopher Lee Bryant for changing the tone a little bit. I think a 2-2 split certainly feels a lot better than a 1-3 series loss. And the Cubs trailed late in this game on Sunday, 3-2. A Jason Hayward bouncer. What do they call that? A Baltimore chop, Brendan? You're the baseball player. I think that's what JD said.
I've actually never heard of that term before. So,
I think that's what he said on the broadcast.
Baltimore chop.
If you Google that and it means something else, don't blame me. I did not look that up. I thought that's what JD said. But one of those high bouncers that just stays in the air too long, they can't convert the ground ball out. Nick Castellanos with a good at-bat, singles to keep the inning alive. And then for the first time, this is kind of a wild stat, Brennan, but for the first time since his 3-homer game in the Great American Ballpark in Cincinnati, in 2016, and if you're wondering, why do I remember the year 2016? It is, yes, the year that the Cubs won the World Series.
You won the World Series a year, yeah.
Yeah, you're right to kind of have your alarms go off at hearing that year. But since 2016, Kris Bryant has not homered in Cincinnati. Kind of a very surprising stat. But he picked a very lovely time, Brendan, to break one out, his 23rd of the season on Sunday, and it put the Cubs ahead. Ian Happ adding a dinger, and that would be how the Cubs would wrap up the series. So like we said, I think you take the split. There's a good bit to talk about in this series, and we will touch on all of it. So we've got some more roster moves. Steve Cishek hitting the injured list with a hip injury, not something that certainly sounds particularly great, but we will continue to monitor that. Kyle Ryan has been on the bereavement list, so all of our thoughts and well wishes out to Kyle Ryan and his family while he's dealing with what's going on there. And so we have some movement just in that regard, and the Cubs starting pitching in this series not at its best. Pretty, solid-ish starts from Yu Darvish and John Lester, and bad starts from Kyle Hendricks and Cole Hamels. So we will kind of talk about all that, and we will talk about the guys in the bullpen who stepped up in the absence of guys like Kyle Ryan, Steve Cishek, and Craig Kimbrell, who are all out this weekend, and we do have some of those names to discuss. But Brendan, I do want to just kind of run through these games real quick. As always, 4-game series, so I'll kind of try to keep this pretty abbreviated. I think you guys are all paying attention, but just so that we have the groundwork for our lengthy conversation to come. On Thursday, the Cubs, a 12-5 win. So Cole Hamels, not a good start. 3 innings. He gives up 8 hits, 4 earned runs, 5 runs, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts. He gives up a home run, so not his best, and obviously a very short outing. 77 pitches in those 3 innings, but the Cubs offense was up to the task against Sonny Gray and the Reds pitching staff to get Hamels off the hook here. Anthony Rizzo with an RBI double in the first, and it was the Nick Castellanos show. Brendan, he hits 2 home runs in this game, 1 in the third, his 13th of the year, and 1 in the fourth, his 14th of the year. The 1 in the fourth put the Cubs up 6-5 after the Reds had tied things up with a 3-run bottom of the third. Jonathan Lucroy getting in on the action in his first start with the Cubs. He had an RBI double. Ian Happ with his 3rd homer of the year in the 7th to make it 9-5. Kris Bryant with an RBI single to score 2 runs, and then Jonathan Lucroy would add another RBI later in this one. That would be the Cubs' 12th run, and that is all that she would write in that one. And the one thing that I do want to note in this game, this was another outing from Tyler Chatwood that we have to make sure we take a pause and talk about. He actually picks up his 5th win of the year, which I think is deserved and reflective of the job that he has done in some of these games. He's gotten those spot starts. We know that. We've seen him in a variety of different roles for this Cubs team, but he really seems to be thriving in these opportunities where he is asked to give the Cubs some length. Give them a few innings, either keep them in the game, save the rest of the bullpen, whatever the particular task is of the day. Tyler has been up to it for the most part. In this one on Thursday, he goes 3 innings, allows just 1 hit, no runs, just 1 walk, and he strikes out 6. And his ERA on the season now under 4 at 3.92. So for a guy that obviously came over here to start, you got to give him a lot of credit for adapting to the role and, really working on what plagued him in his first year with the Cubs, the obvious lack of command, and he's found a way to be pretty productive here. And we've seen throughout the years a good chunk of these games where you're not really sure what the outcome would be if Tyler is not able to eat up some of these innings and eat them up so effectively as he has. So Thursday was certainly one of those games, so definitely a hat tip to one Tyler Chatwood. Duane Underwood Jr. also getting in this one 2/3 of an inning. He gives up a hit, also a strikeout, and no runs or walks in this one. So another good showing for Duane there. On Friday, this was a 5-2 Reds win. The Cubs would jump out to an early lead, and guess who? It was Nicholas Castellanos, his 15th of the year. I think we've mentioned this before, but big fans of Nicholas Castellanos here on the Cubs-related podcast. And then things would go south from there. The Cubs, I think on Sunday they finally figured out how to do it, but Aristides Aquino for the Reds with a pretty unorthodox batting stance was just destroying the ball. Brendan, this wasn't even his biggest game on Friday, but he does hit his 4th homer of the year in this one. That put the Reds up 2-1. Suarez homers, Votto homers, Peraza with an RBI single, yada yada. Anthony Rizzo would get hit by a pitch with the bases loaded in the top of the 8th to bring home a run, but that would be all that she wrote. 5-2, the final. To read Yu Darvish's final line in this one, he goes 6, allows just 4 hits, 4 earned, no walks, and 9 strikeouts, but he gets bit by the home run ball. Not a good ballpark for you to be pitching in, as really that has been the thing that the one issue he's really had in 2019 as he's gotten those walks under control for the better part of the last month plus or whatever it is the home run ball. So this is not a good lineup and not a good ballpark for him to pitch in, but otherwise that line is really good. Still no walks, 9 strikeouts, so he's still generating a ton of whiffs. Command was pretty good, but when 3 of the 4 hits you allow are home runs, and the offense wasn't there for him on that day, so he does take the L in this one. But a pretty good outing for you. I think you can live with that, and he's just got to keep that home run ball in check. And the Cubs do lose the game to Trevor Bauer, so congratulations on your regular season win. Trevor, you did still lose 2 games in the 2016 World Series, which if you're doing the quick math there, Brendan, that is 50% of the Indians' losses in the 2016 World Series were hung on Trevor Bauer. So you can kind of pick or choose. You can take the August win in 2019 or the 2 World Series losses. I know what I would choose. But on Saturday, it was a bit of a laugher for the Reds. Kyle Hendricks was, Brendan, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Kyle's going to want to not throw 86-mile-an-hour fastballs right down the middle of the plate to some of these Reds hitters. I think that he knows that, but it definitely did not show up on Saturday. This one gets out of control pretty quickly. The Reds take a 1-0 lead in the first inning, and like I said, Aristides Aquino just going off in this game. He hits 3 home runs in this game, and I'm not going to read the rest. I'm looking at this recap here, and it's just a lot of Reds. A lot of guys in Reds hats on the scoring plays of this MLB.com game day. The one thing of note for the Cubs, Kyle Schwarber does hit his 27th home run of the year. Final line on Kyle Hendricks, 2 2/3, 12 hits, 7 earned runs, no walks, and 2 strikeouts. He allows 3 home runs. He is now 8-9 on the season. Even with 7 earned runs, Brendan, his season ERA is sitting at 3.48. So you know that Kyle's having a very good year when a 7-run outing in 2 innings doesn't really make the ERA look particularly ugly, but this would be all that she wrote in this one. And actually, just a correction from earlier, it was Alex Wood that the Cubs did the damage on Thursday, not Sonny Gray. They would face him on Saturday and score no runs on Sonny Gray. So apologize. I know Sonny Gray listens to the podcast. Apologies for adding those fake runs to your earned run average, Sonny. That was all she wrote on Saturday. I don't think we have to talk about that one again. And Artie kind of ran through what happened on Sunday. The Reds would take a 3-0 lead into the top of the 6th inning here on Sunday. Javi would double to bring home Jason Hayward in the 6th. That made it 3-1. Tony Kemp, as we mentioned, I think on that last podcast, a guy you can rely on to say, hey, we need some contact here. We need you to put the ball to the right side, put the ball to the outfield. He does just that after Ian Happ doubles, gets over to third base, and Tony Kemp grounds to the right side to bring home the 2nd run of the day for the Cubs. And then that scenario I laid out earlier plays out. 2 outs, nobody on. Jason Hayward with a very high chopper on the infield that the Reds cannot convert into the out, as Jason's got that pretty good speed. Nick Castellanos with a good at-bat to stay alive and singles up the middle. And then Christopher Bryant with his 23rd home run of the year puts the Cubs up 5-3. Ian Happ would add a homer in the top of the 8th. That made it 6-3. And the Cubs lock this one down. We will talk about this. I think it's a good transition, Brendan. But they go David Phelps, who has a clean inning, no walks, no hits, and a strikeout. Rowan Wick, who picks up his 2nd hold of the year. We've talked about him a lot over the last few weeks. 2 innings, 1 hit, no runs, no walks, and 4 strikeouts for Rowan Wick. And then we turn our hats to the left, Brendan, for Pedro Strope's 10th save of the year. He goes an inning, he walks 1, strikes out 1, no hits, no runs. And I thought he looked pretty good in this one, generating a good amount of whiffs. The breaking stuff looked good. Is he vintage Pedro Strop? Probably needs some more outings to figure that out, and maybe that may not come again, but he looked good. He looked better than we've seen at certain times this year, and obviously he's building back up from being on the injured list, so good to see Strop out there, good to see him be effective and lock down this win for the Cubs. So again, a 2-2 split, and Brendan, I think the thing I want to talk about first, I do want to clarify something with you, and I asked you this before we got on, but I want to make sure I do it on the air. Yeah. I was told by the internet, Twitter, Reddit, a lot of those places, specifically Instagram comments, if you have the courage to read through them, I was told that Kris Bryant was not clutch, could not get big hits, didn't have that DNA in his body. But the home run on Sunday, that was a pretty big hit, Brendan.
Yeah, you know what? It's weird. I feel like Kris Bryant, he never has these... Wait a second. He has about 20 of those, Corey. So just add this to the bucket list.
Right.
Yeah, I know. If you remember, too, in that World Series year, he had several game-tying or go-ahead home runs. So just add this to the list. We made a list on CubsInsider.com of about 18, maybe 20 or so, 8th-plus inning hits that either tied the game or took the lead.
Yes, so that definitely is the case. I think we've talked about this on here before, that he does have, like you just mentioned, he's got a ton of really big hits. If you dig into maybe like specific metrics over periods with his numbers and runners and scoring position, maybe you'd want them to be better. But the dude clearly has the ability to come through in big moments. I might direct you to particular home runs in the World Series. We often mention that were pretty clutch and pretty important home runs in Chicago Cubs history, but always good to see KB do things on a more regular basis that kind of busts that narrative a little bit, because he, quite literally wins this game for the Cubs on Sunday. But Brendan, I want to start with just the pitching staff as a whole, I think, because obviously sure. we kind of went through in the last podcast, and we have over the last few weeks here, a lot of injuries, a lot of movement, a lot of things going on with this pitching staff. Like I mentioned, pretty good starts from Lester and Darvish. Not great from either of them, but I think especially for Lester coming back from that start against the A's, he looked good. Probably could have gone another inning in this one, but 5 hits, 3 earned, 3 walks, 7 strikeouts against this Reds lineup. I thought it was a good performance from John. Didn't appear to be getting hit too hard in this one. A good outing from him. And, maybe an Angel Hernandez call or two away from even a more productive outing here for John. A good outing, just too many home runs, something that he's well aware of. And I don't know if you have that quote from him, but he actually, I think, tossed out an expletive in one of his interviews.
I very much enjoyed that, yeah.
Yeah, but Cole Hamels, bad outing. Kyle Hendricks, bad outing. And like I said, Steve Cishek hitting the injured list. Kyle Ryan has been on the bereavement list. And so you've got a lot of these guys stepping into different roles. And I think maybe the place to start, and where I'll throw it to you, is this was a really nice outing on Sunday with the 2 innings for Rowan Wick. We talked about him in the last few weeks, and especially I think on the last episode, or maybe 2 episodes ago, we really highlighted how important it was to get him into spots like this and see what he was capable of. When you're dealing with injuries like you have to someone, we don't know if Brandon Morrow is ever going to come back. We don't know. Like I said, I would prefer like a wellness check on him once a week. I just, at this point, I don't even believe when they say, oh yeah, he threw a flat ground today. I'm like, prove it, right? Like, do we even believe that that's happening? I don't know. It's like a conspiracy.
Is he still alive? Yeah.
Right. Craig Kimbrell on the injured list, so that was mostly precautionary as they were kind of relaying that information to us. Kinsler on the IL, that also kind of sounded precautionary. But now Cishek, after a really rough outing in that Oakland series, he's on the injured list, and
that one sounds more serious too than the others. Yeah,
because
so
you
that
look
was
at
a
kind
little
of
bit more concerning.
His delivery and the way that his body moves. There's some articles. Eno Saris shared a good one that I think we linked to on CubsInsider.com that just kind of goes into the details of guys that throw like Cishek may be more prone to some types of serious injuries. So have to keep an eye on that, but. Really important for guys like Rowan Wick to get these opportunities, get their number called in these high leverage spots, and see what they're made of. And so far, Rowan Wick has done nothing but impress. Again, 2 innings, just 1 hit, no runs, no walks, 4 strikeouts. He's got a 1.7 ERA on the year, and you watch him touching, hot, upper 90s with that fastball. He's got a great breaking ball, and he looks like he's really building that confidence out there, Brendan, to be a high leverage, top of your bullpen type reliever.
Yeah, and we talked about this too on the last podcast, but Joe Madden emphasized this point during the series where, the Cubs do have a lot of bullpen injuries right now. Most of them don't seem to be severe, but it gives other guys opportunities to showcase what they got. We see what happened with Rowan Wick, but we also saw what happened with Duane Underwood Jr. as well. So we have 2 guys who have an extremely lethal fastball, both of whom throw fastballs 95, 96, 97. Rowan Wick has a dirty curveball, Corey, dirty curveball, and then Duane Underwood has that nasty changeup. So the Cubs instantly infuse 2 guys who have tons of heat and a good secondary pitch, where early on in the year, they were getting away with a lot of contact-oriented type relievers, like Brandon Kinsler, who's still been pretty good, but someone like Steve Cishek, who was good throughout the entire season as well, but they didn't have a lot of those high-velocity guys, and a lot of others have pointed out the Cubs just don't have that type of makeup. But once Kimbrell comes back, right, once Strop regains his health, which he looked pretty good in that last outing, by the way, and everyone comes back to health, the Cubs may have a really solid, deep bullpen where now it's not just, 1 through 4 guys, but maybe it's 8 guys teaming up, especially when rosters expand. So I'm more confident, I think, about this bullpen despite these injuries. I know it sounds weird, but I'm assuming Kimbrell's going to come back. He'll be fine. I'm assuming Kinsler, that again, now is precautionary. He'll be fine. Maybe that's just my optimism going forward, but the team as a whole, when they're at their optimal level, especially in the bullpen, I feel better about it. The Steve Cishek injury, though, Corey, that one's not good. And the results have not looked good for Steve over the past, 2-3 weeks now. So clearly the hip has been bothering him. He even said that he did not disclose his injury to trainers, which is, our favorite thing. So he's been pitching with this hip injury for who knows now, maybe even more than 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is. Hope Steve gets back healthy, but that one's going to eat me up just because, hip injuries have sidelined Cishek early in 2016, 2017. He had a torn labrum. So it's one of those issues where you just don't feel confident in, and it sucks to say, but even when he comes back, you just really don't know. But if someone like Duane Underwood can step up, if Rowan Wick continues to perform like that, all of a sudden you still have that deep bullpen, which is something I think Theo really wanted to emphasize by going out and even getting someone like David Phillips, who has also been pretty good. So overall, bullpen, I get the issues, I get the injuries are concerning, but overall, I still feel comfortable with who we have right now.
Yeah, the Cishek thing is certainly concerning, though I do kind of... This was bound to happen, right? Like, they run him out there every other game for the past year plus since they've had him on the team. Eventually, you're not going to be able to rely on that, and I don't mean that.
It still sucks, though.
Well, of course, and I don't mean that he was bound to get hurt necessarily, but the way that he's been used and how much they've relied on him was bound to reach a boiling point at some point, and it may come with this injury, but hopefully he's able to work through that and come back at some point here and be effective for this team, but. Look, Brendan, I think that we have to look at this stuff as perhaps these types of injuries and guys missing time, sometimes this type of stuff can be a blessing in disguise. And that's certainly an optimistic look on it, but what it does is what we've been saying. It forces guys like Wick, Underwood, etc., to be thrown into higher leverage spots and see what they're made of. And we already kind of saw the Cubs succeed with that to a degree with a guy like Brandon Kinsler and Kyle Ryan. Early in the year, you had a rotating shuttle of guys going up and down from the bullpen. You didn't have Kimbrel yet. You had Strop struggling at times, etc., and you start to use Brandon Kinsler and Kyle Ryan in more high-leverage spots, and lo and behold, they really take to the role and have been huge factors in this bullpen for this Cubs team for the entire season now. Again, Ryan on the bereavement list now, should be back shortly, I would think, and Kinsler... It sounded like it would be the minimum stay on the injured list, no more than those 10 days, just to make sure that everything is good there with that pec soreness that he had. But you've found success in sort of asking them to do a little bit more than maybe you would have originally intended. And so perhaps getting Wick into these high leverage spots, getting Underwood up with the team, seeing what he has, letting him get into more of these spots and develop into a major league reliever. And like you mentioned, figuring out ways to use guys like Derek Holland and David Phelps correctly, giving Strop the opportunity to come back from the injury and see if he's ready to jump back into those high leverage spots. Perhaps all of the movement and all of the trying guys out and having guys up and down, perhaps ultimately by, when we head towards September here and hopefully into the playoffs, you've kind of been able to use that time to build the best bullpen that you can and see what some of these guys are really capable of and put them in roles that you might not have otherwise gotten them in if they didn't have the opportunity to pitch. Like would right. Rowan Wick be in this spot? Would we be even considering him as a high leverage option for this team heading into the final month plus of a division race if he were not able to get these opportunities? Like, probably not. You'd be like, what, are we going to call up a guy from AAA and ask him to be the eighth inning guy? No, but he had these opportunities. He looks really good, and it kind of changes how you're looking at things. And so maybe this is a good thing. Obviously, you need those guys to come back healthy and be effective for this to really be a blessing in disguise, because then you're able to put it all together, right, for the final product. But I do think that there sometimes can be a good thing, instead of just saying our only answer, Brendan, right, for the eighth inning, say when Kimbrel's back, is Cishek, right? You're forced to find different answers. And when you have guys like Wick stepping up, now you can, when Cishek hopefully comes back, you can say, okay, well, the answer doesn't have to just be Cishek over and over again. We've tried some of these other guys out, and they look like they can handle the job.
And we're not even talking about Chatwood, too. You mentioned him earlier in the podcast, but Chatwood's been exceptional, Corey. Not only in just one-inning roles, but in multi-inning roles. So Rowan Wick can go multiple innings. Duane Underwood can go multiple innings. Tyler Chatwood can go multiple innings. Those three guys all throw 95 to 98 and can go multiple innings. Off the top of my head, I could be wrong, but I don't think there's many guys in any major league bullpen that can go multiple innings and throw 98. I may be wrong. Find them for me, but for three guys to do that, that could be significant come the playoffs. And then you throw in one of those starters in the Cubs' current rotation, whether it's Quintana, whether it's Hamels, whatever it is in the bullpen. The bullpen becomes instantly very deep, and it's not the source of a lot of my attention right now. I think right now it is worth talking about the rotation just because the guys are coming back from injuries. Some of them are throwing a little bit slower. Not concerned about it, but I do think the attention does weirdly flip right to that rotation right now, Corey.
Yeah, it just was not the best weekend, which is weird because obviously, we're coming pretty fresh off that stretch where they went those 6 starts without walking anybody. And it's always, I know your alarm bells, Brendan, go off when we're seeing those 86s out of Kyle
That's
Hendricks.
What I mean.
Yeah.
And even with Hamels, too, since coming back from the injuries, throwing about 1 mile per hour slower. So, and Lester, we know Lester's age and whatnot, not to piss you off over there, but it's still something people are talking about where Hendricks and Lester and Hamels may not be showcasing their best stuff right now, giving people cause for concern. I get it. Are you concerned with those three guys in particular? I'm not even mentioning Quintana, but as a whole, are you feeling different about this rotation now than even 3 weeks ago when some guys were healthy, some guys were throwing faster? Where are you right now?
No. I feel about the
same exact.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been pretty clear about my expectations and my feelings towards this rotation pretty much since the offseason.
So do you just expect Hamels to regain his stuff from where we saw it in early June, most of May? Because he looks a little different, Corey, since coming back from that oblique injury.
Yeah, I think Hamels is one we have to keep an eye on because, again, like he dealt with this injury before. He came back when he was with Texas and was not as effective and was pretty open about the fact that he felt he came back early. It affected his performance. He was compensating for things, etc. So definitely want to keep an eye on that. But I'm going to give him a little more time to try and work his way back, get that feel back. And again, this is a tough lineup with this Reds team. It's a tough ballpark to pitch in. So let's get some starts somewhere else, and maybe we can evaluate a little further. But again, I feel like this rotation, all I've really ever expected out of them or asked of them is that I think in general they're going to keep the team in the game. They're going to deliver quality starts more often than not and give this offense a chance to compete in these games. And with that is going to be some bad starts. Like I think that this is not a rotation where I was ever expecting them to be lights out or just a total shutdown nightmare of a staff for teams on a day-by-day basis. I don't think I've ever said that was my expectation, and it certainly hasn't been. So I think that when you're really just asking them to be good, solid, keep the team in games, and obviously you have those guys that do have the potential to go on really hot runs and really dominant runs, but I wouldn't be expecting them to do it all the time. So I think sometimes you're just going to have series like this. Like I think we know that Hendricks is not the pitcher that we saw in this start over the weekend here against the Reds. He hasn't been that pitcher for the majority of the 2019 season, but he has these outings. Like we know he doesn't throw very hard. So sometimes when he the velo isn't there on a particular night, his arm maybe isn't feeling as good that night, and his command isn't there, he's going to get blown up. It happens. This isn't the first time, and it probably won't be the last time. So I haven't really changed any of my thoughts with the rotation. I'm not particularly concerned. I think that just with this group, the way that they're structured, especially a few of these guys not throwing particularly hard, you're going to have stretches where it just doesn't look very good. But I think that I feel comfortable in relying on them to turn that around and not let a stretch like this linger for too long.
Yeah, I'm not concerned about the rotation, but my attention is there just because I feel so much stronger about the bullpen, even with those injuries. But for Cole Hamels, when he just went on the injured list, his release point had a noticeable dip where he was throwing a little bit closer to his body. Some of the data from Brooks Baseball shows that. So when he came back from the injured list, good to see the release point is right back up in that range from where we saw it, not just this year, but last year as well. So I think with Cole, he looks healthy, at least from some of the data. Who knows if that's even an appropriate way to use it. But he still looks, I think, healthy. And even in that Cincinnati start, despite getting blown up, velo was a little bit higher. So when he first came back in that first start, he was throwing 90 to 91. This most recent start, he was throwing 91, 92, some 93s in there. His overall average velocity was 91.5, within range for most of the year. So it just may take a little bit more time for Cole to get that feel back. But at the very least, the reason I'm most encouraged about this recovery was because when he came back from his previous oblique injury, the mechanics were still off. And that's what he was talking about, where he wanted to take his time coming back and not force the issue. Because when he did that early on with the Rangers, his mechanics were messed up, and the data showed that, where his release point was noticeably different. So at least for causing or for giving anyone else more concern about Cole Hamels, that type of data does suggest that he is healthy, which I think is good to see. And then just to bring in Yu Darvish over here, despite giving up those multiple home run in that first start in Cincinnati, I thought he looked fine. I still think he was getting the whiffs. He was throwing 95, 97. Stuff looked good. Fastball command looked really good. And I like the attitude, too. He's cursing after the game, saying he gave up, he had like 9 strikeouts, 4 hits, 3 of them were home runs, and he used an expletive F in home runs. I love it, right? So I think throwing Darvish into that mix, I am extremely confident in giving Darvish a top 2 start in the playoffs if they were to start tomorrow. I think he has the mindset. He's feeling his fastball. He's throwing really hard. Secondary stuff looks really good. Overall, the rotation, I'm not concerned about it. Still will monitor Hamels with Hendricks. He's fine. He has 1 start every now and then. It just does not look good. You just can't be concerned about Hendricks, I think, unless there's an injury or something, which it doesn't appear to be that's the case. Overall, fine with the rotation, Corey.
Yeah, and like you said, with the Darvish post-game quote, him saying the effing home runs, I love that from him because it does feel a little bit to me, and we talked about this with Jason Hayward, where Darvish, the language coming from him, the body language, and the performance, it really does scream of someone who is feeling the success of all the work that they've put in to kind of reverse course from the past struggles, and now they're at the point where they're getting pissed off about the stuff that's still hampering them. And I think that's a really good sign for you. There's no more feeling sorry for myself. There's no more I need to be a contributor for this team. He knows he's contributing to this team, and now he's getting pissed off when he's not getting close to perfect, right?
I mean, it's what like Hayward said early in the year, like better late than never, you get it, right? So like their comfort level with the media and owning some of the issues they had earlier, it's recognizable. And so for you to have this type of persona with the media, I think that's extremely encouraging. Yeah, they feel like guys who know that they have turned a bit of a corner, and now they're able to focus on like, oh, okay, like hopefully that's behind me, but now I'm getting pissed off that I'm not perfect and that I'm not excelling at the way I really want to be. And I think that's a good sign. It's a sign of, real competitors, and it's where you want these guys to be, I think, mentally. But if you were to rank in order your level of confidence with these starters 1 through 5, who would it be? We should do a check-in on that like every few weeks. Wow. I mean, I would still probably put Hendricks close to the top. I might. No, you got to rank them, Corey. You can't do that. Okay, give me 1 through 5. 1 through 5 confidence right now. We're just talking confidence level, or am I putting like a playoff rotation together? Because it's whatever different. You want to say. Yeah, confidence. Because I was going to say it's a different conversation. John Lester's a different pitcher if we're talking about the playoffs. Well, that goes into your confidence ranking. So what's 1 through 5 for your confidence? I would probably say Hendricks. Okay. Then I would say tough one. Hamels, but I'd like to see him. He's coming back from an injury, but I still would need to see more from him, even in a negative direction, before I lost confidence with him. I just think he's been so good for this team, and he just knows how to make those adjustments at this point in his career. Okay.
Then I would probably say Yu Darvish right now at 3.
Wow.
I would put John at 4 and Jose at 5. And really that's, again, when we're talking confidence, it sort of depends on what the exact question is. But I just, I think, it's not rocket science to think that Darvish has a bit of a higher ceiling than John does right now in terms of the outings that he's able to put out. So, again, if we're talking playoffs, like John's, probably 1 or 2. He just gets it done in the big moments. But I think, you just kind of have to lay all your cards on the table and just be honest about things. Like, John's prone to these blow-up starts. It's just what it is. And I think that the guys like Hendricks, Hamels, and Darvish have just shown a more, reliably to offer a bit of a higher ceiling at this point in where they're pitching and where their careers are. But it could go either way. If we were talking maybe a couple weeks ago prior to that Oakland start, I'm probably feeling a lot better about John. But there's definitely just some of those outings where, as a big fan of John's, I feel very helpless, right? Like I'm just watching it get pounded all over the place. And it's very hard for me to put into words. It's just a very helpless feeling where I want him to be better. I believe he's better, but sometimes it just happens. So, but I also think we're really splitting hairs to a degree. I do feel pretty comfortable with this group as a whole, because even Quintana at 5, that's really sort of disrespectful to Q. He's been pretty good for the majority of this year, and I think if you asked me to give him the ball in a 1-game playoff or something like that, I'd be pretty confident that he was going to give you a good outing, even though, again, he's prone to the blow-ups and maybe his ceiling isn't as high as some of those other guys. But that's a tough question, but I think that's where I would go. My confidence in Hendricks doesn't really waver. He's just been that dude for so long for this team, and a bad outing in Cincinnati isn't going to change that. But yeah, I guess that's where I am. But
I get it. Yeah,
yeah.
You're thinking more. You're thinking more long term here, which I like for your for your rankings, whatever. But I think for the short term, let's say the next 2 weeks, right? Who do I feel most confident to go out there and give you a quality start? Right now, not even thinking about the playoffs or September, just right now. And for me, I honestly think it has to be Darvish in the top 2. If we're going out for this next series, who do I want most pitching? And I think right now it's Hendricks, it's Darvish, it's Lester, number 3 for me, despite that blow up. I think the command, I think the cutter looks good. I think he's still getting the whiffs, especially on the curveball today. Those are the top 3. And then with Hamels, he's my number 4, just because right now he's still getting back from that injury, which is something to monitor. Number 5 is still Q. The reason Q is number 5 is just because of those whiffs that he does not get, and he's not a heavy ground ball pitcher. So even though Hendricks does not get as many whiffs either, a lot of the contact's going to be weak. He has an exit velocity better than 95% of Major League starters. Q does not have that portfolio. But it goes to show you just how Darvish is pitching right now. I think when he takes the ball, you're expecting double-digit strikeouts. You can't get that from most other guys in the rotation right now. And I think that has value next week, in 2 weeks. And we'll see how that plays off once the season progresses. And the playoffs are a completely different beast. You have different matchups, lefty, righty-centric lineups you may be facing. So not to say, this is the playoff rotation I want going forward, but in my belief, how the rotation shapes up right now, who do I like watching pitch the most? Who do I feel most confident in pitching right now? I would say Darvish is number 2 and Hendricks is number 1.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much in agreement. We were sort of half answering different questions. I do have an inability to think in the short term like that. Sometimes, because I do agree with you. I think if you ask me to give one of them the ball tomorrow, I'm giving Lester the ball and not Hamels. But I guess I'm just banking.
And that's what I mean by that.
Yeah,
I get what you're saying with your long-term pitching.
Right. So
I agree with you.
I guess in theory we have the same rankings where it would be Hendricks, Darvish, Lester, Hamels, Q. But I just I'm banking on long-term Hamels getting back to what we've seen from him over the last year plus.
It's just right now it's an uncertainty.
Yeah,
it's not as if it's. I mean, it's not like it's not going to happen. I think it's going to happen just like you. But right now, when Darvish gets lit up, you're kind of surprised that's the case right now. And again, it goes to show you the progression he's made over the last several months now. It's just, it's fun to watch, and him getting on the mound, I'm expecting 10 plus strikeouts every single time now.
Yeah. But I feel pretty good about the way that I talked about this rotation all offseason. I said over and over again that I think they have a high floor, and that's why I was pretty comfortable with this group, despite maybe lower velos, age, etc., whatever concerns you may have had. And I think that they've delivered on that. I think they've delivered on being a solid to good rotation that really allows this team to compete in games and stay in games. Like, I don't think that this rotation is costing this team, if you're looking on the whole, nearly right as much as the offense has at times or the bullpen has at times. I think this rotation has done their job, and I think they're going to continue to do their job. And really, like we've talked about, I think you and I, Brendan, over the last couple years, and this is the case, and it has been all year, it does not matter what order they are in 1 to 5 at any given time, right? Yeah. It just matters that somebody's performing deservedly to be at the top, right? And at the beginning of the year, for the first 7 or 8 starts, it was John Lester with a 1.16 ERA. For a while, it was Cole Hamels. For a while, it was Kyle Hendricks. For a stretch, it was Jose Quintana. For the last bit, it's probably been Yu Darvish. And that's what I think is all you need from this rotation. You just need somebody to be stepping up at any given time and being that guy you are super confident in they can give you a dominant start. And at times, if everybody's healthy and going right, you have a handful of those guys. So I'm good with this rotation. I think they're in a good spot despite not the best overall weekend in Cincinnati here. But I do want to talk about the offense for, I guess, perhaps the remainder of the podcast here. We've talked about every other aspect of this team. And I want to go back to Kris Bryant, if you'll allow me, Brendan, just for a second. And I do want to read a stat that's coming across my Twitter as I'm talking on this podcast, and it is from Joe Ostrowski from 670 The Score, and he gave out a few lines for Kris Bryant, and these are his numbers with runners on, and then I'll read his numbers with runners in scoring position and 2 outs. In 2019, with runners on, Kris is hitting .291 with a .391 on base percentage and a .526 slugging percentage, good for a .917 OPS. And in 2019, with runners in scoring position and 2 outs, he is hitting for a .289 batting average, a .400 on base percentage, and a .658 slugging percentage, a 1,058 OPS. Now, granted, obviously, in 1 year, runners in scoring position with 2 outs is not a gigantic sample size, but all of those numbers are really good. All right, so we've talked about this a bunch, but Kris Bryant is just really good. He's one of the best players in baseball, full stop. End of discussion. Like, do you want him coming through maybe in more of those spots? You could nitpick individual innings where you want him to come through, right? But the numbers are really good. His overall numbers are near the top of the league. He's really, really good, and that's really all there is to say about it. But I wanted to read those numbers in particular because it's just something that comes up all the time. Kris Bryant isn't clutch. He's he can't get the big hit. Whatever, and it's really just not true. So yeah, there you go. That's all I really wanted to say.
Some people do forget too because they end up losing this game. But in Game 3 of the NLDS, Corey, he tied the game 5-5 on a home run in the 9th inning. Like, that's clutch. And then in the World Series, of course, tied the game in Game 5 1-1 with a home run. Game 6 led off the game with a home run. Right. So he has the whole clutch gene thing is just bizarre. He has multiple walk-off home runs. The one in 2015 started that massive stretch in August and September that led them to 97 wins, multiple walk-off hits, multiple walk-off home runs. The idea that he's not clutch is just simply not true. And again, he has around 20 or so 8th inning, game-tying, or go-ahead hits that sometimes I feel like with these types of players who are always consistently good, that's their norm. And when they don't come through, that gets highlighted. It's like the same thing with Albert Almora, where his norm is not good. And so when he does well, that gets highlighted. And that's some weird concept that some fans have, and I get it. But Kris Bryant is so good that when he's not so good, that gets magnified.
Yeah, and I get it, like, to a degree, right? When a guy is the best player on your team, or I know that some people have differing opinions on that, whether it's rooted in statistics or not, but you want them to come through every time, right? You want them to be that guy and just carry that burden. And especially when you look, I guess, north at a team in the Brewers who would probably win 70 games a year if Christian Yelich didn't do literally that on a regular basis. I get where it comes from, but it's just such a wild standard to hold somebody to. Like somebody like Bryant, who, like you said, has come through in so many of these big spots, and the numbers, especially in 2019, bear out that he's just as good as he always is in those particular high leverage and runners on situations. Like you just can't expect him to get it done every single time. I know there's going to be games where the Cubs have runners on and you need KB to get that big hit. He can't do it every time. Nobody does it every time. So I understand where, like, kind of that scrutiny, or you want them to be that guy every single time, but it's just not realistic. And I just wanted to read those numbers to remind everybody, like, he's been really good with runners on and two outs. He's come through in a lot of these situations, and his numbers on the whole are near the top of the league as a hitter, and he hits just about as well in these higher leverage spots. So there's really...
I see a lot of fans who, cite that clutch statistic on Fangraphs. The clutch statistic is normalized against your normal production. So it evaluates what you do in certain leverage situations against what you usually do in a neutral context environment. So the most clutch hitters in professional baseball make no sense. Alex Gordon is number one. Top 5 is Gene Segura, Hunter Dozier for the Royals, Wilson Ramos for the Mets, Jose Iglesias for the Reds, and David Peralta for the Diamondbacks. Notice how I'm not saying Christian Yelich, I'm not saying Cody Bellinger, I'm not saying Javi Baez, I'm not saying Kris Bryant, because those guys are typically so damn good all the time that when they don't come through in those high leverage situations, it counts against them. Where most of the other guys, they're not that great all the time. When they do well, they get a boost in that clutch rating. So it's a BS number, man. Like most of those numbers are not. That clutch rating is just a BS number.
Can I ask you a personal question, Brendan?
Yes.
How do you feel about KB's haircut?
Oh, you're gonna get me in trouble, man. You're gonna get me in trouble. I'm not a fan of it, but Kris Bryant can do whatever he wants. He's just that. He's that guy. I mean, do I model for Express? No, I do not. So Kris Bryant can do whatever he wants.
All right. I was just curious. I mean,
how do you feel about it?
I feel about the same. It's certainly not my style. It's getting the back, the part that comes out of the helmet's getting a little wild.
It's
like
little wild.
But
I kind of like
taste.
Kris Bryant's not the type of wild guy anyways. For him to have that wild haircut is somewhat ironic.
That's his version of lashing out. That's I'm sure if you ask
I kinda
Mike,
like
his
it because
dad,
of that.
he that's the craziest thing he ever did, right? Like he never got in trouble in school, never stayed out past curfew, but one time he had a wild haircut. Like he let his hair grow too long. I'm with you. Not a fan, but KB he could show up with whatever hair he wants. I mean, it's similar to Javi. We've seen Javi pull some weird stuff with the hair.
I like that one.
The braids.
Loved it. I love the braids. I hope he brings that back eventually.
I just mean, like, those guys, you can do whatever you want. Like Javi, KB, you want a mohawk, you want to shave your initials into your hair, be my guest, right? Like, just keep doing you. I've got no complaints about it. But Brendan, I do want to transition. We're not going to harp on this too much because we're going to get into the preview of this upcoming series with the Phillies. I think we've covered all the ground that we need to cover, but I'm not going to let this go, Brendan, because I think it's important. And we've talked about this a lot. You guys knew the minute the lineup came out on Saturday that you were going to hear Brendan and I talk about this. Brendan, you cannot lead off with Albert Almora Jr. I literally can't believe that I am saying this to you on the air again. This is an insane thing to keep doing. I don't understand what is happening. He has, this is not a hyperbole, the worst on-base percentage of any position player on the team. He has a worse on-base percentage
than Daniel Descalso.
He has a worse on-base percentage than John Lester. Stop putting him at leadoff. You cannot be doing that. The division is separated by less than 3 games to 2 teams. You cannot be doing this, Brendan. And what bothers me even more about this, and hopefully this is a way to I know that there are serious Almora supporters out there, and I want to say this to kind of find a middle ground here between us all. I said on the last podcast that I liked the way they were deploying him, and he was succeeding in those spots. That's what bothers me even more about this choice on Saturday, Brendan. Almora was coming in particular starts, in particular matchups, coming in off the bench, and he was getting better results. He looked like he was seeing the ball better, getting better cuts on the ball, and was getting better results. And so instead of just saying, this is pretty good, let's just ride with this, right? You stick him up at leadoff. He goes 0 for 5. He strikes out twice.
Swings at the first pitch of the game. Right down the middle, of course.
He commits an error in center field. He misplays 2 other balls, which they may be difficult plays, but when you're defense first and you need to make those plays.
Overthrows his cutoff guy again, Corey, multiple times this year.
This just can't be happening. And again, we've harped on a lot of different people. This certainly, I don't think I've ever been harder on anyone on this podcast ever than I was on Daniel Descalso when he was on this team. So this is nothing against Almora. I like Albert Almora. I like him as a player in certain roles. I like him as a person. I think I've told you guys this story on the podcast, but the night the Cubs win the pennant at Wrigley Field, me and my friends go behind the Cubs dugout. We stick around for the on-field celebration and whatever, and the only interaction that I had with any player was when Albert was walking off the field, and maybe after a few adult beverages, you can let your mind wander, I really loudly yelled out, "Albert effing Almora." And he looked at me. We had a little moment there, like a finger guns type thing, whatever it was. I like the guy. I hate...
He's got a great smile too, by the way. Just throwing it out there.
And speaking of hair, let the curls grow, man. I got no issue there. It looks great.
Let him out.
But, dude... He cannot be the leadoff hitter on this team. He's got a 670 OPS, you guys. That is way too low to be at the top of this order when the games mean this much. And there are so many things. I would be the first to tell you, right? You guys know this. I've had the opportunity, the good fortune to work in a couple of front offices, and even some of the smartest people I've ever been around, analysts for the New York Yankees, would tell me some of these lineup things are so marginal, they're really not worth worrying about that much. Whether this guy hits third or fourth or whatever, it really doesn't make that big of a difference. Don't lose sleep over it. But this is the type of thing that does make a difference. When you're talking about a division that 2 teams won 95 games in last year, and that wasn't good enough, right? And a division right now where the top 3 teams are separated by less than 3 games, hitting your worst on-base percentage player in the leadoff spot and giving him the most at-bats in a game is the type of stuff that matters. And I'm going to, we're going to keep talking about it if this keeps happening. And it's not like it's only him. There's other guys that you could put in that spot where we would have the exact same conversation, right? Jonathan Lucroy getting the start and hitting 6th, don't love it. In what universe is he hitting in front of Schwarber? Brendan, this stuff matters, and there's definitely a lot of it. Brendan and I are not going to sit here and be like, well, Joe's an idiot because Castellanos shouldn't hit second or whatever. That's nitpicking. It's marginal. It's really not going to make that much of a difference in the end. But Albert Almora hitting leadoff cannot happen again. I'm telling you, Brendan, I literally can't believe we're having this conversation again.
Look, you're
like
has to be the last time we talk about this. Yeah, I'm speechless too. And not only was Al batting leadoff, but I mean, LaCroix batting 6 against or in favor of Schwarber batting up there, who's on pace for almost 40 home runs this year. In what world does that make sense? And I get some of the numbers. I get the reverse split stuff. What I don't get is Ian Happ, who had another successful game on Sunday, is not getting more than half of the starts. That doesn't sit well with me. And this is all opinion-based, right? So saying, oh, Joe's an idiot for not doing that. No, we're not saying that. But when Bodie has been who he is this year, and Al has been who he is this year, you know what to expect from those guys. And those two players in particular have been going through massive adjustment phases. Happ has already overcome this adjustment phase, right? The scouting reports have to be flipped on Happ because he's accomplished those changes. So get him out there. He's going to hit well. He has 4 home runs already this season, both from the left and right side of the plate. By the way, that home run against Garrett today, exceptional stuff. 88-mile-per-hour slider right there on it. Line drive, laser from the right side for Happ. Huge sign, right? So I think right now, I'm not saying even for the rest of the season, I'm saying right now, the next week, in the moment, how on earth can you argue that Ian Happ should not be playing as much, or rather should be playing less than Almora, less than Bodie? It's mind-boggling to me. He has such a massive ceiling for his power, for his walks, that, okay, the numbers for anyone on this team right now may not make the most sense to justify starting any of these guys consistently, but at the very least, Happ has successfully adjusted. He's in a great place mentally. When he does get his chances, he's hitting the hell out of the ball. Why, Corey? Why would he not be playing, again, in the next week or two? Most of these games is beyond me.
Production over talent, man. It's
Simple
big boy time. Like some of these sayings, they don't mean anything if you don't hold them to in every instance. And again, like, that's what's so frustrating about this, man. We just talked about how they were using Almora more successfully, and he was getting better results than he had been for months. And you just flip it right on its head by hitting him at leadoff. And
doesn't make sense.
You just can't do it. And what's so funny is when you say something like this on Twitter, there's always people that come out and they're like, well, who would you put there? They don't have a true leadoff hitter. Let me make this clear. Albert is the worst option on the entire roster to hit leadoff for this team. You want to put Tony Kemp there. You want to put Victor Caratini there, for all I care. They are better options than Albert Almora. So saying who would you choose, literally anyone, my friend, literally anyone is a better option than Almora hitting leadoff. If he's going to play, he should be where he has been in these past several starts, 6th or lower. And he had been getting better results, and it was not a big deal, right? You didn't hear me complaining about him getting those starts, did you? No, because I said that was fine. Like, he can be deployed successfully, but leading off, and then, like, because Gray has reverse splits, Brendan. Like, if my eye roll on Saturday reading some of that logic was like, God, I thought I was going to go blind. Stop it. Again. We don't harp on this stuff for any other reason than this division is really close. Every little thing matters right now. Every single thing. That game where Derek Holland was pitching to righties, even though it's not the spot that he should be in, that stuff matters. The division is tight. The margins are as slim as they can be. And unless we want to find ourselves in a position like 2018 where the Cubs win 95 games and they still have to play a stupid Game 163 tiebreaker just to avoid the wild card game, we are going to keep harping on this. Get this stuff right. Let the best 9 guys and your best group every day try to win games and try to win this division. All right? It's as simple as that.
It's as simple as that. Corey.
And I do just want to say, Brendan, the Pirates are the biggest pile of useless sacks of garbage.
What is that?
Unbelievable. They had like an 8-3 lead in this game. They give up a game, go ahead for now, probably game winning shortly. Grand slam to the stinking Cardinals. Clint Hurdle watching Kyle Crick out there give up 1,000,000 runs just sitting there. Sometimes you think he's doing it to spite the Cubs. But
useless.
Just the biggest useless sacks of garbage. Clint Hurdle. human garbage.
Not a
the
friend of the
team
podcast,
just fold
no.
the franchise. I mean, we shouldn't expect any less. Like, Jake Arrieta ended them in 2015, but come on, guys. Like, you can't win one game against the Cardinals or Brewers. Like, seriously?
Disgusting.
Anyway,
All right,
on to the Phillies.
Yeah, hopefully they're rallying right now, so we'll see. But anyway, okay, so let's preview this upcoming series against the Philadelphia Phillies, Corey. So the Cubs will have an off day on Monday. They'll travel to Philadelphia maybe on Monday for a 3-game set against the Phillies. You can get tickets to that series, as always, through our sponsor, SeatGeek, with millions of live event tickets and a price match to guarantee. SeatGeek proves there's a better way. Search sports, live music, comedy, and more. SeatGeek has the tickets you're looking for all in one place. They built the fastest way to find tickets, so you can stop searching for the perfect seat and just start enjoying it. Why is SeatGeek better than the rest? A quick look at the App Store shows over 50,000 5-star reviews. How is that for customer satisfaction? It's just a better process. It pulls together millions of tickets from all over the web, then it rates each deal on a scale of 1 to 10. Finally, SeatGeek displays them on an interactive, very easy to use map where green dots mean good deals. Red dots are bad, overpriced deals. Again, I got my tickets to Wrigley Field in about a week and a half now against the Washington Nationals. Took me 5 minutes. Bought 8 tickets, done within 5 minutes. Forwarded them on to my friends. They have them. My family, they have them. Easy as that. Best of all, SeatGeek will even give you guys $10 off your first SeatGeek purchase. All you need to do is use our promo code. Download the SeatGeek app and use promo code CubsRelated for $10 off your first purchase. That's promo code CubsRelated for $10 off your first purchase. Okay. On Tuesday, Jose Quintana takes the mound for the Cubs, who is 10-7 with a 4.23 ERA. That game starts at 6:05 p.m. He will be facing Jason Vargas, former Met, who is 6-6 on the year with a 4.09 ERA. On Wednesday, same start time at 6:05 p.m. Cole Hamels back on the mound for the Cubs, looking to rebound off his bad start in Cincinnati. Hamels on the year is 6-3 with a 3.09 ERA. He'll be facing Phillies ace Aaron Nola, who is 10-3 with a 3.67 ERA. On Thursday, to finish off the 3-game set, we have Yu Darvish on the mound, 4-6 with a 4.43 ERA. He'll be facing former Cub, who never played for the Cubs, was still with the team, Drew Smyly. Not having a good year this year, 75 innings pitched, 2-6 with a very bad 6.96 ERA. Right now, the Phillies are 60-57, fighting for a wild card spot with the Cardinals, with the Brewers, with the looks to be most of the NL West as well. Just not living up to expectations. I've been following them a little bit. Gabe Kapler, apparently he's on the hot seat. Whatever. The Phillies have not been playing that well. Cubs going into Philly, hopefully take care of business. As it stands, the Cardinals are still playing. As we just talked about, they came back from an 8-3 or 8-4 lead. They scored 5 in the bottom of the 7th, so we'll see how that goes. Milwaukee, however, did lose 1-0 to Texas. So as the standings look right now, the Cubs are 2.5 games up of Milwaukee. If St. Louis wins, they'll be 2 games up. If they lose, they'll be 3 games up of St. Louis. Cubs are 10 games above 500. St. Louis 60-55. Again, if they win, will be 61-55. If they lose, will be 60-56. Milwaukee 62-57, 5 games up. And their last 10 games, they've been 5-5. St. Louis has been 4-6. The Cubs have been 7-3. I mean, again, late in the season, go out there, win. If there's any noticeable things to look for, it's going to be Cole Hamels, how he continues to get back from that injury, how the velocity looks for Quintana. Hopefully goes out there, continues to get the Cubs quality starts. Command has been a lot better. He had that one bad start within the last month, but other than that, I think he looks pretty good. And then just seeing Ian Happ. I want to see Ian Happ get out there every game. I don't care how they do it. I don't care if it's in left field, center field, right field, second base, wherever. I need to see Ian Happ every single day in this series. Corey, anything you're looking for?
It should be an interesting series. I mean, you've got a team in Philadelphia that is going to need to win these games. You've had the red-hot New York Mets jump them in the NL East, and in those wild card standings, I think the Braves pretty comfortable at the top of that NL East. But looking at that wild card, the Phillies are quickly losing ground to teams around them. So this is going to be a chance for the Cubs to really put a damper on their playoff hopes and make some real enemies out of those fans in Philadelphia. So always a fun time to do that. Maybe a nice time to show Bryce Harper what could have been, right? Like, we're going to help send you further down in the wild card standings while the Cubs are trying to charge their way to a division title.
He's had a pretty underwhelming year, though. Just looking at the numbers right now, I know he had a noticeable home run in San Francisco, but his overall numbers are just not the best. Batting .249, has 22 home runs, and his weighted on base average is only .352. So, not having the best. Kris Bryant, if I need to remind you, is
better.
Almost .390 for his weighted on base average. WRC plus around 140. So, just to compare, Harper not doing the best this year.
I'm trying to think of some of the Facebook takes that we would get on Cubs Insider if the Cubs had given out a 14-year contract to a guy hitting .249. Not that I care about batting average, but you guys can fill in the blanks at how some of those takes would be going. But, yeah. Anyway, it's just about winning games, man. Like, I think this was a very important win for this team on Sunday to come back and get that win, earn the split. Like, we know that this Reds team is always in the game. They are a tough team. They're hovering around 500 now, and their pitching staff is much improved than what we've gotten used to with this Reds group. So I think to go in there and end up facing Sonny Gray, Trevor Bauer, and Luis Castillo, to be able to pull off two of those games, I think is totally fine. A good way to start this road trip. And now you head further east and try to just keep things afloat before you're able to get back home here. But again, like, everything is important now. Even if you can get one of St. Louis or Milwaukee to start to fade, you may not be able to get both of them to do that. So you kind of have to operate under the expectation that one of them is going to push you to the limit here. And obviously you've got some games with those teams individually coming up over these last month and a half of this season here, but taking care of business on the road and not allowing your road record to like totally tank what you're doing here and the good efforts that you put together at home is a real key as you head in a tight division race like this. So I would say just keep it going. Obviously you want better performances than we saw from Hendricks and Hamels this weekend. Just blow up starts like that certainly aren't going to help anyone, but just keep it going. I think we've been pretty clear about all we're asking for, Brendan. Just give me the best lineup we can on a daily basis, and I think that the talent level that this group has should start to win out on the road more than we have seen. But a good win on Sunday, a really nice way to pick up the team from Kris Bryant and Ian Happ there, putting those runs together late in that game, and hopefully they can ride that here. They're not going to face Jake Arrieta, so we don't have any juicy narratives for this series to deal with like we did when he faced Yu Darvish back at Wrigley Field earlier this year. So just try to get wins, man. That's really all it is. It's a tight division, and you got to take care of business on your own. So we can't just keep blaming playing on the road for any and all Cubs woes. Because correct me if I'm wrong, Brennan, but if you get into the playoffs, you might have to play on the road at some point. So yeah, you're gonna want to figure that out. But otherwise, I think that's all we have for you. A pretty interesting weekend. A lot of roster moves and obviously 4 games here with the Reds and a tale of 4 games, right? The 2 on the ends of this Reds sandwich, very nice. We'd love them. The 2 in the middle, not so great. So it is what it is, but ultimately a split is just fine to start this 3-series road trip, and hopefully the Cubs can improve on that and win this series upcoming with Philadelphia. As always, when we do have those off days, hope you enjoy it. It's about mid-August here, so it's about that time to take these off days. And even though sometimes we really miss Cubs baseball, just remember that you're going to have to buckle that seatbelt for the next month and a half here. So maybe enjoy the off day, take a breather, and we'll all reconvene on Tuesday to do our best to will this team to some victories over the aforementioned Bryce Harper and the Philadelphia Phillies. But other than that, I think that's all we have for you. As always, we thank you guys for joining us here on the Cubs-related podcast. We will talk to you after the Cubs and Phillies finish things up on Thursday. And as always, go Cubs.